Money has always been around. There's no denying that. It's in our pockets, our bank accounts, and our minds. It dictates our lives, builds empires, and starts wars. But have you ever stopped to think about what it actually is and where it came from? The story isn't as simple as you might think. It's a tale of debt, religion, violence, and revolution that spans tens of thousands of years. One thing's for sure, by the end of this video, you'll never look at a dollar bill the same way again. You'll understand how a piece of paper or a number on a screen came to have such immense power over human civilization. Let's start by killing a popular myth that's been taught in economics textbooks for generations. We've all been told that before money, people simply bartered. A farmer with too many chickens would trade them with a potter who needed eggs. The potter would trade pots with a blacksmith who needed cookware. It sounds logical, doesn't it? The problem is, it's almost entirely fiction. Archaeological and anthropological evidence tells a completely different story. In small, close-knit communities throughout human history, this kind of direct trading was actually quite rare. Instead, early human societies ran on a complex system of gifts, obligations, and social credit that was far more sophisticated than simple barter. Think of it as a community-wide IOU system that operated on trust and memory. If you needed something, a neighbor would give it to you, creating a social debt. You were expected to repay it later, not with a specific item at a specific time, but by helping them out when they needed it. Maybe you'd help with their harvest, or watch their children, or share your next big catch of fish. This was a system built on trust, social relationships, and communal memory. The first form of money wasn't a coin or a piece of gold. It was a promise, a social obligation that bound communities together. Our prehistoric ancestors were already thinking about value and debt long before they had pockets to put coins in. Archaeologists have discovered tally sticks scattered across the ancient world, physical evidence of this accounting system. The Lubombo bone, found in the Lubombo Mountains between South Africa and Swaziland, is about 30,000 years old and has 29 distinct notches carved into it. These weren't just decorations or random scratches. They were ancient ledgers, physical records of debts and payments, or perhaps lunar cycles. Even more impressive is the 20,000-year-old Ishango bone, discovered near the source of the Nile in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. This baboon fibula has 3 columns of notches arranged in complex mathematical patterns. Some researchers believe it represents a prehistoric accounting system, while others think it might be evidence of early mathematical thinking. Either way, it shows that our ancestors were tracking quantities and values long before the invention of writing or agriculture. This was money of account, a conceptual form of currency that existed thousands of years before the first coin was ever struck. In ancient Mesopotamia, around 3000 BCE, temple priests kept elaborate clay tablets, recording debts, credits, and transactions. These tablets show that complex accounting systems existed alongside, and perhaps even before, physical forms of money. The concept of debt, it turns out, is older than the concept of payment. As societies grew larger and more complex, the informal system of social credit began to break down. You can remember who owes you a favor in a village of 50 people, but what about a city of 50,000? Trading with strangers, people you might never see again, required a more standardized form of exchange. This led to the rise of commodity money, where items with intrinsic value were used as a medium of exchange. In ancient Mesopotamia, around 3000 BCE, barley became one of the first forms of commodity money. It was perfect for the job, durable enough to last, divisible into any quantity you needed, and everyone needed it for food and beer. The shekel, which we now think of as a coin, was originally a unit of weight, equal to about 180 grains of barley. Workers were paid in barley, taxes were collected in barley, and debts were denominated in barley. This was the world's first standardized currency, but it had its problems. Barley was heavy, difficult to transport over long distances, and could spoil if not stored properly. Other cultures used different commodities based on what was valuable and available in their regions. In ancient China, cowrie shells, imported all the way from the Indian Ocean, became a popular form of currency. They were beautiful, durable, portable, and difficult to counterfeit. The Chinese character for money is still based on the pictogram of a cowrie shell. In parts of Africa, salt was so valuable that it was traded ounce for ounce with gold. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt, which is where we get the word salary from the Latin salarium, and the phrase worth his salt. Cattle were used as money in ancient India and parts of Africa, which is why we still use the word capital from the Latin capita, meaning head of cattle. The ancient Aztecs used cacao beans as currency, which meant that literally, money grew on trees. In the Pacific island of Yap, they used enormous stone discs called rhinestones, some weighing several tons. These couldn't be moved easily, so ownership was simply remembered by the community. Even human skulls were used as currency in parts of Sumatra, while tobacco became legal tender in colonial Virginia. But do not be fooled, this wasn't a simple, linear transition from barter to commodity money to coins. Different systems coexisted, overlapped, and competed with each other. The real revolution in money, the innovation that would change everything, came with the invention of coinage, and for that, we have to travel to the ancient kingdom of Lydia in modern-day Turkey. Around 600 BCE, the Lydians did something revolutionary that would echo through history. They took a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver called electrum, formed it into small, standardized lumps, and stamped them with an official seal. These were the world's first coins. This simple act solved a major problem with using precious metals as money. Before coins, if you wanted to buy something with gold, you had to weigh it and test its purity every single time. Was it pure gold or mixed with cheaper metals? How much did it actually weigh? Every transaction required scales and expertise. The Lydian stamp guaranteed both the weight and the purity of the metal, making transactions faster, easier, and more trustworthy. The government seal was a promise backed by the power of the state. The idea was a massive success and quickly spread across the Greek world and beyond. The legendary King Croesus of Lydia, whose name became synonymous with wealth, was the first to issue separate pure gold and silver coins around 560 BCE, creating the world's first bimetallic standard. To this day, we still say someone is rich as Croesus. In ancient Greece, the invention of coinage fueled a commercial revolution. City-states like Athens began minting their own coins, stamped with symbols of their power and identity. The Athenian tetradrachm, featuring the owl of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, became the dollar of the ancient world, accepted from Spain to India. These coins weren't just for buying goods. They were a form of propaganda, spreading the fame and influence of the city far and wide. Soldiers carried them, merchants traded them, and they became a symbol of Athenian power. The Greeks also pioneered early forms of banking. Temples, seen as secure and sacred places, acted as the first banks, accepting deposits, giving loans, and changing money for merchants and travelers. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus was one of the most famous banking centers of the ancient world. Private bankers called trapezitai set up tables in the marketplace, exchanging currencies and offering credit. The word bank itself comes from the Italian banca, meaning bench or table, where these early bankers conducted their business. And what about the mighty Roman Empire? The Romans took the concept of money and scaled it up to an unprecedented level. Their silver denarius and gold aureus were used across an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. The Roman state controlled the money supply with an iron fist, using it to pay its massive armies, fund its colossal building projects like the Colosseum and aqueducts, and maintain the vast bureaucracy that held the empire together. But the Romans also made a fatal discovery that would haunt monetary systems for millennia: currency debasement. To pay for their endless wars, lavish imperial spending, and increasingly expensive army, emperors began mixing cheaper metals like copper and bronze into their gold and silver coins. Under Emperor Nero, the silver content of the denarius was reduced from 100% to 90%. By the time of Emperor Gallienus in the 3rd century CE, it was less than 5% silver. This led to rampant inflation. Prices skyrocketed, people lost faith in the currency, and the economy began to collapse. By the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE, its economy had largely reverted to a primitive barter system and payment in kind. It was a harsh lesson in monetary policy that would be forgotten and relearned many times throughout history. With the collapse of Rome, Europe plunged into what we call the Dark Ages, though they weren't quite as dark as the name suggests. Trade dried up, cities shrank, and the complex monetary system of the Romans was replaced by a patchwork of local currencies and a return to barter and in-kind payments. For centuries, the economic landscape was fragmented and chaotic. Kings paid their knights with land rather than money, and peasants paid their rent with labor and crops. But then something remarkable happened during the Crusades. The Knights Templar, a powerful Catholic military order founded in 1119 to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, created one of the first international banking systems. Here's how it worked. A pilgrim traveling to Jerusalem could deposit his money at a Templar preceptory in London and receive an encrypted letter of credit. He could then present that letter at a Templar preceptory in Jerusalem and withdraw his funds, minus a service fee. This system was incredibly secure and eliminated the need to carry large amounts of dangerous-to-transport cash through bandit-infested roads. The Templars became fabulously wealthy, acting as bankers to kings and popes, managing vast estates, and even lending money to entire kingdoms. They were so powerful that they essentially became a state within a state. But their wealth and power eventually became a threat. In 1307, King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the Templars, ordered their arrest on charges of heresy. The order was brutally suppressed, their leaders burned at the stake, and their wealth confiscated. It was a stark reminder that in the world of money and power, even the mighty can fall. And just when Europe was rediscovering the power of banking, a true monetary revolution was already well underway on the other side of the world. In 7th century China, during the Tang dynasty, merchants faced a problem. Chinese copper coins were heavy and cumbersome to transport. A string of 1,000 coins weighed about 7 pounds. Imagine trying to conduct large business transactions with hundreds of pounds of metal. So merchants began leaving their heavy strings of copper coins with trusted agents and receiving paper receipts in return. These receipts, known as flying money because they were so light they could blow away in the wind, could be used to settle debts and make purchases. This was the birth of paper money. By the 11th century, the Song dynasty had taken over the system, issuing the world's first government-backed paper currency, called the jiaozi. Initially, it was a huge success, fueling a vibrant economy and making China the richest civilization on Earth. But the Chinese also learned the hard lesson of inflation. The later Yuan dynasty, founded by Kublai Khan and the Mongols, printed massive amounts of paper money without any backing to fund its military campaigns and lavish court spending. The value of the currency plummeted, prices soared, and by the end of the dynasty in 1368, the Chinese people had lost all faith in paper money, reverting to silver for the next several centuries. Marco Polo, who visited China during this period, was amazed by paper money and wrote about it extensively, but Europeans wouldn't adopt the idea for another 400 years. The Renaissance in Europe saw the rebirth of sophisticated finance, particularly in the city-states of Italy. In Florence, the Medici family built a banking empire that made them one of the most powerful families in the world. Giovanni de' Medici founded the Medici Bank in 1397, pioneering techniques like double-entry bookkeeping, which allowed for much more accurate accounting, and creating a network of branches across Europe. They became the bankers to the Pope, which gave them immense power and profit. The Catholic Church officially forbade usury, the charging of interest on loans, but the Medici found creative ways around this, such as charging exchange fees and administrative costs. The Medici used their vast fortune not just to accumulate more wealth, but to fund the arts and sciences, sponsoring artists like Michelangelo, Botticelli, and Leonardo da Vinci, and helping to kickstart the Renaissance. They demonstrated that money wasn't just about buying things, it was about power, influence, and shaping the course of history. 4 Medici became popes, and 2 became queens of France. Their story shows how financial power can be converted into political and cultural dominance. As we move into the 19th century, the world was on the cusp of another monetary revolution. the Industrial Revolution was in full swing. Factories were churning out goods at unprecedented rates, and international trade was exploding. To facilitate this, the world needed a stable, reliable monetary system. The answer was the classical gold standard. Great Britain officially adopted the gold standard in 1821, and by the 1870s, most of the world's major economies had followed suit. Under this system, a country's currency was directly linked to a specific amount of gold. You could, in theory, walk into a bank with a pound note and exchange it for a fixed quantity of physical gold. This created stable exchange rates and fostered a period of unprecedented global trade and investment. It was the golden age of international finance, with capital flowing freely across borders and fueling economic growth. But the gold standard had a dark side. The money supply was limited by the amount of gold a country had in its vaults, which could be restrictive during economic downturns. If a country needed more money to stimulate its economy, it couldn't just print it. It needed more gold. This led to painful periods of deflation and unemployment. The debate over the gold standard became one of the most contentious political issues of the late 19th century. In the United States, the populist movement and William Jennings Bryan's famous Cross of Gold speech in 1896 captured the frustration of farmers and workers who felt crushed by the rigid monetary system. And what of the 20th century, our so-called modern era? The gold standard, which had seemed so unshakable, was shattered by the outbreak of World War I in 1914. Countries suspended gold convertibility to print money to pay for the war, leading to massive inflation. After the war, attempts to return to the gold standard were chaotic and ultimately failed. The system was too rigid to handle the economic shocks of the modern world, and it contributed to the economic instability that led to the Great Depression of the 1930s. In 1944, as World War II was drawing to a close, delegates from 44 Allied nations met at the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to design a new international monetary system. The Bretton Woods system was a new kind of gold standard, sometimes called the gold exchange standard. The US dollar was pegged to gold at a rate of $35 per ounce, and all other currencies were pegged to the dollar at fixed exchange rates. The dollar became the world's reserve currency, the foundation of the global economy. This system also created the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, institutions that still shape global finance today. The Bretton Woods system ushered in a period of post-war prosperity and stability, known as the Golden Age of capitalism. International trade flourished, economies grew rapidly, and living standards rose dramatically across the developed world. But the system had a fatal flaw. It relied on the United States having enough gold to back all the dollars held by foreign countries. As the US printed more and more dollars to pay for the Vietnam War, the Great Society social programs, and growing trade deficits, countries like France began to doubt America's ability to honor its commitment. They started demanding gold for their dollars, draining US gold reserves at an alarming rate. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon made a shocking announcement that would change the world forever. In what became known as the Nixon shock, he unilaterally suspended the direct convertibility of the US dollar to gold. What was supposed to be a temporary measure became permanent. With that single act, he ended the Bretton Woods system and severed the last link between the world's money and a physical commodity. The gold standard, which had dominated global finance for a century, was dead. Since 1971, we have been living in an age of pure fiat money. The value of a dollar, a euro, or a yen is not based on a pile of gold in a vault. It's based on faith. Faith in the government that issues it, faith in the stability of the economy, and faith that it will be accepted by others as payment. It's a system of promises and trust, not so different from the social credit of our prehistoric ancestors, but on a global, institutional scale. Central banks can now expand or contract the money supply as needed, giving them powerful tools to manage the economy, but also the potential to cause inflation if they print too much. And just when we thought we understood money, just when the system seemed settled, a new revolution began. On October 31, 2008, in the midst of the global financial crisis, a mysterious person or group, using the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, published a white paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. On January 3, 2009, Nakamoto mined the first Bitcoin block, embedding in it the message, "The Times 03 N January 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." It was a direct commentary on the failures of the traditional financial system. Bitcoin was the world's first decentralized digital currency, a form of money that exists only as data on computers, with no central bank, no government, and no physical form. This was the birth of cryptocurrency. Bitcoin and the thousands of other cryptocurrencies that have followed represent a radical new vision for money. They are based on a technology called blockchain, a distributed, unchangeable public ledger. Transactions are verified by a network of users around the world, not a central authority. No single entity controls it, and no government can shut it down. This technology has the potential to create a truly global, transparent, and censorship-resistant financial system. Supporters see it as the future of money, a return to a form of currency that can't be debased by governments or controlled by banks. But it's also volatile, complex, and has been used for illicit activities on the dark web. Critics argue it's a speculative bubble, an environmental disaster due to the energy required to mine it, and a solution in search of a problem. The story of cryptocurrency is still being written, and whether it will be the future of money or a historical footnote remains to be seen. From tally sticks to barley, from cowrie shells to coins, from paper receipts to digital code, the history of money is the history of human ingenuity and our endless search for better ways to exchange value. It's a story of how a simple promise between neighbors evolved into a complex global system that touches every aspect of our lives. It's a story of innovation and collapse, of trust and betrayal, of empires rising and falling based on the strength of their currency. And it's a story that is far from over. As technology continues to evolve, as new forms of digital money emerge, and as the global economy becomes ever more interconnected, the nature of money itself continues to change. Be sure to watch all of our documentaries, which should appear on the screen just about now. There's only 2 on the screen, but you can find more from our channel page. Let us know which documentaries you want to see next in the comments section below, and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. History, but fast.